Filming at night with your drone is a very polarizing topic. Some people love it, some people absolutely hate it, and it's something that I really like to explore every single time I get a new drone, so today's video is no different. I want to start this video by saying that you should always follow the local rules and regulations about flying a drone at night. In my country, flying a drone at night is not frowned upon. It's actually quite alright, so I am able to do that. If you are not able to fly during the night, maybe this video will showcase the possibilities of the Mavic Air 2 against the Mavic 2 Pro. And before you say anything negative about comparing the Mavic Air 2 to the Mavic 2 Pro, I know they are very different. They come at very different price points. They are geared towards different people, and of course their sizes and their camera specs are also quite different from each other. But I'm still getting lots of questions about which one should I buy in 2020, which one is better, which one would you recommend? So I figured, why not just do the same test with two different drones? I figured it would be an interesting test. So with that being said, enjoy the video, guys. Alright, so starting off with this first location, which is pretty much around the edge of the city. I went there to capture the skyline of the city, and I knew it will be dark, but I had no idea it will be this dark, especially with the Mavic Air 2. So I was filming in 4K 30 frames per second. The white balance was set to 3200. My shutter speed was set to 1/60th of a second. And I was also filming in normal color profile, not D-Cine-alike, because why would you use D-Cine-alike during the night, right? So normal color profile, that also gives you more flexibility for your ISO options. And speaking about ISO, with the Mavic Air 2, it almost seems like you don't have a choice. You have to use the highest ISO possible, which is 6400. So jumping to the Mavic 2 Pro at the same spot, and I'm using pretty much the same settings. Here we are seeing a little bit of a better result. Of course, that makes sense since the sensor is so much bigger, but it doesn't make a huge difference compared to the Air 2 because there's just not too much light around, so both of the drones are having a hard time capturing enough light, and of course the footage is very grainy. When we talk about photos from location number 1, there isn't a huge difference between the Mavic Air 2 and the Mavic 2 Pro, but when we switch to smart photo on the Mavic Air 2, then we see a really big difference because the Air 2 uses intelligent photo mode to capture as many details as possible, and it makes the photo really good compared to just a regular photo that you can take. Jumping to location number 2, and I was hoping that as this place is a bit more well lit and it's also a bit closer to the drone, we'll have better results, but unfortunately it goes the same way as location number 1. It's still too dark, very grainy, very underexposed, and even when using ISO of 6400, the image is just too dark and I would say very unusable. I tried playing with some shutter speeds to make a difference, but the lights are still flickering a bit, so apologies for that. But still, regardless of the shutter speed, the image is just too dark, and I wouldn't say that this is a usable footage for the Mavic Air 2. As for the Mavic 2 Pro, I must admit the footage looks a bit more well lit in my opinion. It looks a bit better, and it's not too grainy in my opinion. It's better looking, that's for sure. And you can see a bit more detail behind those well lit areas, and the images I took from these locations are right here. You can see the Mavic Air 2 and how dark they are, and the Mavic 2 Pro as well. It looks a bit better on the 2 Pro, but when you switch to a smart photo, it brings a lot more light and more data into the photo. It doesn't look too professional, I would say. It doesn't look too good. It looks a bit blurry as well. Now let's focus on this new location which I went to, and this is a playground here in one of our parks, and this is the same spot that I went to with my Mavic Mini, and I'm going to make a little comparison with the Mavic Mini as well. If you guys remember, my night flying test was also taken right at this spot, and here we have pretty much the same situation as the Mavic Mini. We only have the choice of the highest ISO possible, which is 6400, and still the image is very dark, grainy, underexposed, no details whatsoever, and I wouldn't really say it's very pleasant to look at. However, testing the Mavic 2 Pro at the same spot proves that this drone is just a beast, because not only you don't have to use the highest possible ISO, which is 6400, you can go to 3200 and even to 1600 if you want to. Even though it's really dark around this little stadium, you can still go to 1600, and of course it's just a bit too dark, but you can get away with that in my opinion. But 3200 is still the ISO that I would choose for this specific location, but there is definitely a massive difference compared to what we saw on the Mavic Mini and the Mavic Air 2 from this place. I also tried taking a few long exposure shots with the Mavic Air 2 just so I can lower that ISO, remove some of the grain, and use a longer shutter speed so I can capture those light streaks from the cars passing by. So smart photos and long exposure photos are probably the two things that I would be using the Mavic Air 2 for during the night, and not really for any type of footage. And finally, for location number 4, I went to a place that is pretty well lit. It's a large boulevard that we have here with lots of cars passing by, many lights in the area, so I figured if the Mavic Air 2 should perform well, this is the spot for it to really shine. And unfortunately, it didn't shine at all. It's still pretty much the same result even with the ISO of 6400. The results are pretty bad in my opinion. There are just huge spots of darkness in the corners of the footage, and the places which should be well lit still seem a bit underexposed to me, and I really don't like how this footage looks like, to be honest. And for the last time, here is a comparison with the Mavic 2 Pro, and this is where the Mavic 2 Pro really proves the difference that it makes to have a 1-inch sensor compared to the half-inch sensor of the Mavic Air 2. Even with ISO of 1600, you can really get away with using ISO of 1600. If not, if it's too dark, you can jump to 3200. Personally, I would probably go for 3200 and maybe apply some noise reduction plugin later in post. But still, even for 1600 ISO, you can really capture a lot of detail and get away with that low light situation with the Mavic 2 Pro. So those are my flying tests with the Mavic Air 2 and the Mavic 2 Pro during the night. Let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about the results that I got? Do you think they are worse than what you expected, or are they better than what you expected? I really want to hear back from you guys, and let me know if you're able to fly at night in your own country. I'm also very interested about that. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, guys. It's been a pleasure. This is Mike from Drone Supremacy, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.